Welcome, I'm Eddie Muller, host of Noir Alley. Today's film, set in Los Angeles at the end of World War II, revolves around an affair that leads to murder. But it's a far cry from Double Indemnity or The Postman Always Rings Twice. It's The Unfaithful, released by Warner Brothers in 1947, starring Ann Sheridan, Lou Ayres, Zachary Scott, and Eve Arden. It was topical for its time, but because the studio pitched it primarily to women, it's not really considered a crime film. But if Mildred Pierce is a noir, written by the same guy who wrote those two other seminal examples of the form, then you'll find The Unfaithful noir enough. This movie is a case study in how a Hollywood studio operated back then, especially Warner Brothers. There were two production departments, the A unit and the B unit. During Warner's rise in the 1930s, the A unit was run by production chief Hal Wallace, while the B unit was the bailiwick of Brian Foy, often called the Keeper of the Bees. And it was standard procedure for a successful A picture to be recycled as a B a couple of years after its initial release. The theory being, if the recipe worked once, let's cook it again, with less budget and a shorter running time. This strategy remained at Warner's even after Hal Wallace left, striking out on his own as an independent producer. The guy who took his place as the studio's boy wonder was Jerry Wald, a writer turned producer who may have been the most ambitious and energetic guy in town. He was riding high in 1946, having just scored a spectacular success with Mildred Pierce, which revived Joan Crawford's career. Her comeback was the stuff of Hollywood legend. Less known is the fact that Jerry Wald first offered the role of Mildred to Warner's contract player Ann Sheridan, who turned it down. Sheridan was sick of how the studio handled her career, selling her merely as a sexy foil to leading men, while the meaty roles were reserved for Bette Davis, Olivia de Havilland, and Ida Lupino. Sheridan's backtalk led to an 18-month suspension, although the willful Sheridan called it a holdout for better parts and more money. Meanwhile, Jerry Wald was amassing projects to keep his hot streak going. He decided to recycle the classic 1940 Bette Davis drama, The Letter, about a woman accused of killing her secret lover, only he'd spin it to have special meaning for a post-war audience. The main character, Chris Hunter, was a war wife who'd cheated on her husband while he was overseas. To script it, he assigned novelist David Goodis, whose novel Dark Passage Wald was making as the latest Bogart Bacall picture. Goodis's script didn't hide its debt to The Letter quite well enough, so young James Gunn, with only one credit under his belt, was brought in to cover the roots, so to speak. In the end, it was just different enough that Wald felt safe leaving the name W. Somerset Maugham, author of The Letter, off the credits. In early 1946, Ann Sheridan won her face-off with Jack Warner. She got a fresh 6-year contract and began having films tailored for her, starting with Nora Prentice. It was sold as a romantic woman's picture, but in truth, it was one of the darkest noirs of the period. The follow-up was going to be something just as noirish, a Wald-produced adaptation of James M. Cain's novel Serenade. The success of Mildred Pierce had made Wald a little Cain crazy. He soon realized that there was no way the book's queer content would get past Jack Warner, let alone the production code office. Having already put Serenade into pre-production, Wald pivoted and switched the crew and much of the cast over to The Unfaithful, despite the script not being finished. Vincent Sherman, who directed Sheridan and Nora Prentice, was assigned to her again. A consummate and unflappable pro, Sherman started shooting with only 20 pages in hand. Caught short for a location for the protagonist's home, Jerry Wald loaned his own house in Beverly Hills. Eve Arden recalled the players in this somber drama, trying to keep it light and funny on the set because they were never sure, come call time, if there would be any lines for them to say. But Vincent Sherman kept the show rolling, helped out, no doubt, by the great good humor of Ann Sheridan and Eve Arden, two of the wittiest women in the business. In the end, the studio was so pleased with the result, it extended Sherman's contract for another 6 years. From 1947, featuring evocative views of mid-century Los Angeles, familiar faces Jerome Cowan, Stephen Garay, and John Hoyt, and some uncommonly progressive views on marriage and infidelity, here is The Unfaithful.